stupid.
Yeah, hold up. I just went live. Not that you were saying anything crazy, but let's get to it. Good evening, folks. I see Charles Lowry was already waiting for us. Sorry for the delay. We're just trying to kind of fit in with this weekend's tradition of delayed football meetings as LSU's new coach had all weekend out in Oxford. It's been a little bit of a whirlwind Sunday in a lot of different capacities, but happy to be back here talking about some LHSAA playoffs. I'm Jarrett Rosa from Louisiana versus all y'all. He's Chance Hester from Louisiana Football Report. As we do every week during the playoffs, we'll kind of look at bracket by bracket, kind of the latest news of this week, what we saw in quarterfinals, as well as look ahead to this week, what we'll be seeing in the semifinals. As we get going, let's just kind of catch up a little bit, and we can actually mention some of the big changes this weekend on the college front, because it's obviously relevant to a lot of these high school football players all over the state. But Chance, how are you? How was Thanksgiving, and how are you and the fam doing getting back into like a more normal routine after a crazy week?
Yeah, good. No break is ever long enough, especially when you have a little one who does not want to go back to school tomorrow. But it was good. Good break. Spent every day up at Catholic High, as many fortunate coaches did. Spent every day at school, even during the break. But no, man, some great quarterfinal action, and one of the most eventful Sundays we've had in a really long time here in our state. Sundays in Louisiana haven't been super fun this year due to the team in New Orleans not having the best season. But LSU gave us a reason to be glued to our phones basically for the past 3 days. Obviously Lane Kiffin coming to town, new head coach, a flurry of staff moves have already taken place. The drama between him and Ole Miss is obviously something that's going to be talked about for a really long time. As we were coming on the air, I was talking about the transfer portal class. I can imagine is going to be insane already. But excited for just Louisiana football. Louisiana football is in a really good place right now. 4 out of our 5 FBS teams are bowl eligible this year. Louisiana, Lafayette, Tulane, Louisiana Tech, LSU, obviously all bowl eligible, all right, which is awesome for us. And then you just sweeten the pot even more by adding a guy like a character like Lane Kiffin to the mix in all of it. Obviously, the sad part of it is a guy like John Summerall leaving our state, who did such a credible job at Tulane. But fortunate for the kids there that he's going to luckily finish the season with the Green Wave, and that's an awesome gesture by the staff at Tulane. Obviously, as we saw with Lane Kiffin, something they didn't have to agree to, but they did, and I think that's going to be great for the Green Wave. I hope Summerall crushes it at Florida, but not too much. Just the right amount of crushing, not enough to where it hurts our Tigers, but an impossible guy to not root for.
Yeah, Summerall has been right up at, and he's only been back here 2 years, but he was an assistant at Tulane years ago and had recruited the area for a long time. So I actually met him when he was on staff at Ole Miss years back, and he's always been awesome, been one of my favorite head coaches we've had come through. And so, wish him well for the most part, but obviously there's going to be a lot of Saturdays in like September, October where that's not quite the case. The Lane Kiffin deal is going to be super interesting. It's never going to be a dull moment. It never has been watching his career to this point, but I think he's somebody that evaluates talent and fits scheme to talent. It's such an elite level that when he comes to a position in Baton Rouge and at LSU that he's always kind of been intrigued by because of the I don't know if something's going on like headphones wise or mic wise on, I think it's your end, Chance, where I like echo back through, because when I mute you, I don't hear it anymore. But I think the potential there is sky high, obviously, for him to come into a place like LSU where we have as much talent per capita for the NFL as any state historically, and no other Power 4 programs in the state for him to compete with for those recruits. And so there are a lot of natural advantages. He's done incredible things at Ole Miss, been one of the winningest Power 4 programs during his time there. I think the sixth highest win total among teams in a Power Four conference since 2020. And now he ups his resources at his disposal coming here. And yeah, they've made a lot of staff moves. They're already recruiting heavily. That we're going to talk about guys that are going to be playing 4-lane in the coming years, and including one target that is now back in the picture potentially for LSU that we just saw. But let's get into some of these brackets. We can start with the Division 4. I guess we can start non-select this time. I think we started selects last time, and the top 4 seeds all advanced in Division 4 non-select. Haynesville, the top seed with a 48-12 win over Jonesboro Hodge. Jeanerette, the 4 seed with a 36-8 win over Logansport. That I thought that was a really interesting matchup, but Jeanerette takes care of it in maybe more dominant or lopsided fashion than I necessarily anticipated. The 3 seed South Plaquemine gets a 27-12 win over North Iberville, and the 2 seed Mangum with a big win, 49-16 over 7 seeded Eastvale. And so we get a Haynesville Jeanerette matchup at the top, which is a rematch of a 2023 quarters. And at the bottom half, we get a Mangum versus South Plaque matchup that is a rematch of last year's quarterfinals. And so not a ton of surprise in terms of the teams that we see here, but I think impressive fashions that they reached the semifinals in, and now we look forward to some potentially really good semifinal matchups here coming up on Friday.
Yeah, so kind of a lopsided quarterfinal week in Division 4 non-select. Not a lot of close games. You and I talked 3 weeks ago when the brackets first came out, that we expected the top dogs in this bracket to be the top dogs there at the end. So I guess it's not really surprising. The Jeanerette Logansport score does surprise me a little bit. I've applauded Coach Kevin McGee at Logansport a lot over the last few weeks. But Jeanerette, man, seems destined to kind of get over that hump this year, and they just really showed it on Thanksgiving week with a very lopsided win against a very talented Logansport team that I mentioned last week had gone up in classification quite a few times this year in non-district. So they had obviously seen a lot of really good talent. I think a switch flipped for these Jeanerette Tigers after that overtime loss to Covenant Christian. We've talked about a few teams in this playoff that's kind of happened to, where a loss comes along and it kind of helps them refocus. And I think that's probably the story here for the Jeanerette Tigers. Now it sets up a matchup with number 1 Haynesville, a team that has as much history as basically anybody in our state. Jeanerette's got to go a good ways up to Haynesville. Not a short trip. And then at the bottom half of the bracket, North Iberville continues to just stack together a couple of really good seasons as they've entered the LHSAA. They run into a really, really good South Plaque team, a defending state champion. Obviously made the long trip down to Burris, Louisiana. Come up short by 2 scores, and now it sets up a really fun matchup between South Plaque and Mangum. Mangum's been just rolling through the playoffs so far with 2 lopsided wins over West St. John and Eastvale, a team that comes out of a super, super tough district, as we've highlighted before. It's kind of been a common theme that we've talked about over the last few weeks, is just how many of these teams that have come from such tough districts, how they're kind of just made for these deep playoff runs. And so obviously Mangum going against the Oak Groves and OCSs and Faradays and all these different teams of the world are now in a position to where they are hosting a semifinal against an extremely talented Hurricanes team.
A lot of these teams with some really notable history of being to this point. Haynesville is in the semis for the 5th straight year and obviously has a long-standing history of being in the semis and beyond. We talk about them a lot this time of year, and the fact that they have more state championships to their program's name than anyone other than John Curtis, which is obviously a great place to be. South Plaquemine, the reigning champions. It took them a while to get back, but now they're back in the semis for a second straight year, trying to defend this thing. Last year's quarterfinal that I mentioned against Mangum, South Plaquemine won pretty handily, but that was down at South Plaquemine's place, and now they have to take that long return trip up to Mangum, and so that's a little bit of a different deal. And it's a really talented Mangum team. Jeanerette, on the other hand, first time in school history that they make a playoff run this deep. It had been the first time since 1990 that they made the quarters a couple years ago, and now they're becoming regular quarterfinal and now this year semifinal participants. That's a team that has as much talent, guys that are going to go play at the next level on Saturdays potentially in the years to come as anyone in this group, but not quite the same deep playoff history. And so it'll be interesting to see. They had trouble with Haynesville a couple years ago in the quarters. How much different does that matchup look now with, a couple more years under Coach Paul there for that Tigers group?
Yeah, and so obviously we've one of the common themes we've talked about in our shows has been like the been theirs versus the new kids on the block, and I don't think it gets much more new kids on the block versus the been theirs is Haynesville and Jeanerette, and so the Tigers I think have something to prove. Haynesville obviously led by an LSU commit, which we don't see often a lot of LSU commits on 1A rosters, which is proof, kids, that if you're good, they'll find you. It doesn't matter where you go to school. And so, at the bottom of the bracket, like we mentioned, South Platte has to go 294 miles up to Mangum. I just had to look that up because it's about a 5-hour drive. So nice little trip. Got to be the longest trip that anybody's going to take on Friday night. But man, this is a fun slate. Haynesville is one of 8 1 seeds, so every single 1 seed reached quarterfinal week. And they're going to be hosting in a really tough environment that Haynesville has been known for about 100 years at this point. And so really, really fun matchup here in Division 4 non-select.
Yeah, I don't see any other distances that really even come close to that one. So will be interesting. We always love kind of looking at some of those north versus south and one corner of the state versus the other corner of the state type deals. But we'll come back to maybe at the end and just kind of talk about overall who have been some of the biggest surprises to get to this point, pleasant surprises, impressive runs, and, who are some of the teams that we are most confident in now with 2 weeks left finishing this thing and hoisting some trophies. But, I don't think any surprises in that Division 4 non-select, other than, as we mentioned, the lopsidedness maybe of the Jeanerette and Logansport score in the quarters. In the Division 4 select bracket, top seed Westminster Christian of Opelousas is to the semis for, I believe, the first time in their school history. I've got to continue looking back through that, but I have not found yet where they have been. So Coach Byron Porter and company doing a great job. They viewed this team as one that had a chance to make this sort of run, and they were talking when they completed their undefeated regular season about they want to be in the dome and talking about Gate G and all those things, just kind of already laying the plans out. And so they've been a confident bunch. They get a 52-22 win in the rematch against St. Edmund in a game that was much closer in that Week 10 district clinching matchup. Ascension Catholic, a team that has been in the quarters and the semis a bunch. The last time though that they were able to make it to the dome was 2018. They were in the semis just a year ago, but trying to get back over that hump and to New Orleans for the first time in a little bit. They get a 50-42 win in a thriller versus Catholic Point Capee that took everything the Bulldogs had to advance out there in Point Capee Parish on the road. And now they'll head on the road as the 5 seed a little bit further west to Westminster Christian out in Opelousas. Bottom half of the bracket, Ascension Episcopal, the 6th seed, goes out to Lake Charles, gets a 38-7 upset over a Hamilton Christian team that we talked about last week, has just been dealing with a lot of adversity, a lot of noise. They also had some banged up key pieces this past week. And so a challenging end to what had been a tremendous season on the field for the Hamilton Christian Warriors, but the Ascension Episcopal Blue Gators keep doing their thing. They're back this far for the first time since 2016, which does not feel like it's been that long. And then Riverside Academy at home on Friday night beat Ouachita Christian, another perennial power, 38-14. Credit to Riverside, the running back Jaden Abikwe and company, taking care of business. They're back to this point and trying to get back to the dome for the first time since 2023. And so top half is Westminster Christian versus Ascension Catholic. Bottom half is Riverside Academy versus Ascension Episcopal. 2 more certainly really fun small school matchups in the semis.
Yeah, and so at the top, man, like we talked last week, you and I discussed some of those like rematch logistics. Like when you're seeing a team again, maybe in the playoffs, what can happen the second time around. I mean, and you were there. St. Ed's scratched and clawed in Week 10 and gave Westminster, all they had. It ended up being a pretty good game. And the Crusaders this time around, man, just buckled down and handled business, and they just continue to march through these playoffs. Scoring 48 against Opelousas Catholic in round number 2, 52 against a very good St. Edmund team here in the quarterfinals. A team that we'll talk about. Kind of, it's weird to say a number one seed is a surprise, but when you haven't really seen them there, it is surprising when a team gets this first opportunity to be the top dog in their bracket to run the table so far as they have. And now they run into Traven Simon, who has just run wild on everybody this year. He breaks the school record at Ascension Catholic last week by surpassing 3,000 yards on the season. You and I have discussed a lot. Ascension Catholic's had some really good running backs. I go back to a guy named like John Williams, obviously LZ that just left. Absolutely loaded year by year. They seem to always have a running back, and it's just like it's just a crazy thing that you can just assume about the Ascension Catholic Bulldogs is that they've got a back. I don't know who he's going to be, but they got one. He has a 323-yard, 6-touchdown performance there against St. Mary's in the second round of the playoffs. He has 519 yards and 7 touchdowns against St. John in district play. Man, some of these, I'd have to put my Madden on rookie mode to hit some of these numbers, and I'm not even sure I could do so even after the fact. And so that's going to be a really fun matchup. Obviously, Westminster's played against some good rushing attacks this year, but I don't think they've seen anything like Traven Simon yet. And so that's going to be a really fun matchup. Ascension Catholic played for 2 state championships in a row not too long ago where they fell short to some really good LCA teams. And so now they're looking to get over the hump and get back, to the Superdome against a team looking to cement themselves as that number 1 team in their division. And then at the bottom, man, like you said, number 2 Riverside just keeps rolling. Another team with a very talented running back. Seems to be a common theme here in these Division 4 brackets is the rushing attacks of these schools. Riverside just seems like they are on a collision course to get to New Orleans, but they are going to have to go through a really good Ascension Episcopal team that's been able to survive, in the playoffs. A really, really tough game against a really good Kentwood team. They handle business against a Hamilton Christian team in the 3 seed who, like we mentioned last week, has been going through a lot this playoff season. And so that sets up a really fun matchup. But, man, the Riverside Rebels just right now don't look like anybody's going to stop them from getting to New Orleans for the Superdome. And so, 2 really fun matchups in this division as well. Not chalk, not 1, 2, 3, 4. We had a 5 and a 6, and this one make their way there. And no one would really be surprised if 5 and 6 are playing for the whole thing next week. But, obviously both of them have tall task ahead of them trying to take down the 2 top dogs in this bracket.
Yeah, like you said, the 5 and the 6 are good teams with some notable history. I think Riverside has been kind of a team that a lot of folks as the 2 seed look at, with all due respect for Westminster Christian, which is a talented team and a well-coached team and has had a hell of a season. I think folks look more at Riverside as kind of the favorite, partially because of everything they have there in terms of talent and coaching and whatnot. And, we talk about Jaden Obikwe and Boogie Johnson and some of the skill guys there, but Brock Bourgeois, the quarterback, has some experience that they've been consistently good in the trenches, and credit to Lee Roussel and the guys there that do a good job with a strong group up front on both sides of the ball for the Rebels. But the fact that they've been in more of these deep round playoff games that they were in the Dome just a couple of years ago, I think folks are more familiar with them and think that this is a team that has the potential to get over that hump for sure. I wanted to correct myself on something from last week too. I'd mentioned Andrew McCormick, the Ascension Episcopal kicker, because of that close game against Kentwood. even more crazy story for those guys. Andrew, the kicker that's been so great for them all year, was hurt, and so they had kind of their backup kicker, Hayes Trotter, that had to make that game-winning field goal against Kentwood. Westminster Christian, a credit to their defense, and looking at that rematch with St. Ed in week 9, St. Edmund only scored, I say only as kind of an emphasis, only scored 48 points, and it brought their scoring average down at that point. And then they ran into Westminster, who twice in the span of a few weeks, twice in the span of 4 weeks or 3 weeks or whatever it was, holds them to 22. And so tremendous job by Westminster Christian taking care of that business. And I mean, a lot to like about all these teams, certainly.
Yeah, like you said, it is a bunch of well-coached teams. Obviously, you don't, and that's kind of the thing. I had someone ask me last week, we were getting ready to play Ash at Catholic High, and somebody asked me, they good? I was like, it's the quarterfinals. Like, everybody's good. You don't get to the quarterfinals by, like, flipping a coin. Like, and so, like, if these 4 teams that are still fighting right now are all incredibly well-coached, so talented, really, really good on the ground. You can expect probably a couple more big performances from those running backs that we highlighted at both Riverside and Ascension Catholic. And those 1 and 2 seeds are going to have to earn their way to New Orleans, and so it should make for some really fun games.
And as we talk about some of the running backs in this division, a lot of attention to the Ascension Catholic and Riverside guys. Also, just wanted to shout out a guy that's been pretty under the radar, junior for Westminster Christian, Kyle Horde. He and that quarterback, Stephen George, are pretty talented athletes who I'm looking forward to seeing how some things develop for them in terms of some potential first of all, finishes to this season, but the potential of maybe some college opportunities at some point. But I think when the kids are asking you, are they good for y'all's perspective and the expectations at Catholic High, they want to know, are they good enough to beat us if we're kind of playing up to our ability? And I think in the case of looking at this Division 4 select bracket, I think they are all good and capable of beating one another.
Yeah, absolutely, no doubt. There's no way to just chalk up who you think is going to take it home, and that's why we play the game, right? So you can do these on paper all you want, and yes, all 8 1 seeds make it to the semifinals, and it would be really easy to be like, oh, well, see, it's just top heavy. Well, we've got 13s and 14s and 10s, and like all these teams that are also still playing. So that's why we play the game, there's potential for teams in the teens to be playing for state championships next week. And I think that just shows how competitive the current state of brackets, since they kind of, I guess they cleaned up or tuned up the select, non-select brackets, a couple of years ago to make it a little bit more balanced. And I think what it's made for is some just incredible matchups that you and I've talked about. Even in the second round, we're getting deep playoff worthy matchups. And so all these Division 4 games are going to be a lot of fun.
I think they could still honestly stand to scale this down some, and that we don't need 8 dang playoff brackets in Louisiana. But particularly once you start getting to this point, you feel like there's kind of a consistency of good matchups, and it has been exciting this year in particular to see some really intriguing matchups starting a little bit earlier in the bracket. But obviously we still have our share of some lopsided ones too. That would be great to see some of the tighter scores more consistently earlier on. But moving up to Division 3 non-select, top seeded Gina 44-20 win over Mansfield. Union Parish just keeps crushing dreams. They, for a second straight week, end an undefeated season run. They beat Erath, the 5 seed, 14-9. In the second round, they beat 4th seeded Kinder 20-14 in the quarterfinals. And so Coach Spat and company just going on the road, playing their brand of football, hitting folks in the mouth and scrapping out playoff wins as they typically do this time of year. It has been a team that, for all of the metrics of what was their record against teams with winning records, what was their seed, all of those things were down by the Farmers standpoint, and now here they are right back in the semifinals, and they'll have a semifinal rematch of 2 years ago when they went down to Gina and got a win there to go on to the Dome. It was one that kind of had some drama and contentiousness around it, whether you want to look at the teams themselves or just, fan base is not loving some of what was brought to some of that. But bottom half of that bracket, St. James, emphatic win against Oak Grove in a 3-6 matchup, one that we were looking forward to. St. James gets a 57-13 win against the Tigers, the most points that have been scored on Oak Grove in a playoff game in program history. And I think that is more of a credit to St. James being that electric than it is saying anything negative about Oak Grove that is consistently strong. Lauraville went up to Sterlington, had a tough night, as a lot of folks do at Sterlington year round, and particularly this time of the season. Sterlington with a 44-6 win as the 2 seed advance, set up a Dome rematch against third seeded St. James, the bottom half of the bracket. This is the third straight year that these two teams have met. 2 years ago, it was a semifinal up at Sterlington that St. James won. Last year was in the Dome. Sterlington got the best of it. Now Sterlington gets home field advantage in this thing, but obviously a place that, despite a long trip, some of these St. James kids have shown they can go up and get a win.
Yeah, so we'll talk about Gina a lot, as the one said. I've been singing the praises of Jay Rourke for 3 weeks now. But talking about how Union Parish got there. So they're facing, like you said, an undefeated Kinder team, a team that they put out last year in the playoffs. And they're up 14-7. Kinder goes 75 yards to tie the game up with about 6 minutes left. And then Union Parish, in a tie game, actually fumbles. And Kinder scoops it, takes it from the 50 to the 9. All the way. So there was about 30 seconds left at the time, and they threw a pass on 4th down and didn't get it, and the game ends up going to overtime. Kinder outgained Union Parish 336 to 217 and lost. So Kinder dominated the game, dictated the game, but the Farmers, like we've talked about it, man, when the leaves turn, when the grass turns brown, man, like nobody wants to play Spat and his boys. They run a style of offense that is just bullying. Like, it really is. It's just bully ball, man. I've played against them 3 times when I was in high school. And it was no different then as it is right now. They bully you. They're going to line up in formations that nobody in high school runs. They're going to get in 12 personnel, 21 personnel, and they are going to run the ball at you about 50 times and dare you to stop it. And it works well for them way more often than it doesn't. And so that sets up a matchup. The untrained eye sees 112, but like you and I and the people that really keep up with things, we see a standard of Division III in Union Parish back where they're used to being after playing a freaking buzzsaw of a schedule. I mean, they opened the season 1-2-3 with North Dakota, Airline, and Alexandria. And they lose all 3 games by, a couple of them by really lopsided fashion. But there's a reason Spat schedules those games, and then they play Calvary in district. They have a random week 10 open date out of district. And what does Spat do? He schedules Sterlington. And so could have taken a bye week, could have maybe scheduled somebody else, but, they've got Sterlington and Calvary and Ash, North Dakota, Airline all on their resume, and it's one of the big reasons why they're playing right now. I'm a huge advocate of, you've got to schedule some tough games. No matter how hard your district is, you've got to go schedule tough games in the non-district, because not only for power rankings, but, like, when November hits, like, you're going to be able to your kids are going to lean on those experiences of, hey, like, remember in week 1 when we went up 2 classifications and got our butts whipped by this team? Like, hey, like, we've grown since then. Like, we have the experience of being in tough moments. And I think Union Parish is really showing that right now with, like you said, 2 straight weeks of ending undefeated seasons. The Gina Giants, though, man, like, they look like they are finally ready to get over that hump. Jay Rourke, like I've said, doesn't get nearly enough credit. When you talk about the upper echelon of coaches in the state. And all he does is continue to build Gina into a winner. And so that's a really fun matchup. And then on the bottom half of the bracket, I think I found the second longest trip St. James has to go 246 miles up to Sterlington. That, like we've talked about, that beautiful facility they've got there. This is what it's all about. A matchup like this. This is a state championship quality semifinal, which is, you get a lot of them, but you never take them for granted, man. A Sterlington team that just continues to roll through the playoffs, scored a ton of points, go through a really tough district, play a tough non-district schedule. Like I've said, they go up in classification all the time. They are not, they don't back down from the challenge of playing. Hey, we're going to go play Ouachita Parish. We're going to go play Neville. We're going to play Tioga. We're going to go up in classification and get ready for these deep playoff runs. And St. James is no different. St. James plays teams, and they played Terrebonne this year. They've gone up in classification several times. And now you're setting up two just blue bloods here, in the semifinals. I thought St. James Oak Grove was going to be the game of the week, and it was really only the game of the week for one team. And St. James just does something to Oak Grove that, go back and look. People don't do that to Oak Grove. Oak Grove doesn't get bullied like this in the playoffs. And St. James just dominated from start to finish. Both teams coming off very lopsided wins. Hats off to Oak Grove and Laurelville, like we talked about last week. Tremendous seasons. Programs obviously pointing in the right direction. But man, that bottom matchup is really a fun one. And when you see Sterlington, St. James, and Union Parish all still in the playoffs, you're in the you got to be at least in the semis in Division III non-select.
Yeah, those three teams have run into each other a good bit in some deep playoffs. As we mentioned, the St. James Sterlington dynamic is a third straight year that those guys will see each other. And when St. James was able to go up to Sterlington and get that 2023 semifinal win, I looked at kind of the senior-led group and having the senior quarterback in Braden Williams and how beneficial that was. This year's a different deal. They certainly have some good senior leaders on this year's team as well. The quarterback, though, is a sophomore, and they do have some young guys that they're relying on in a lot of spots. But it's a sophomore that was thrown into the fire right out of the gate as a freshman and led them to the Dome last year. And so I'm super interested to see how Jawan Jackson and some of those younger guys fare on this trip, because it is a tough place to go play. It's a long trip, all of those things. But while he and some other key pieces are young, they are battle tested as can be as young guys. And so that's always kind of an interesting dynamic of just at what point are young guys not young guys anymore? At what point is that experience enough that they're unfazed? And I think Jawan Jackson may be there.
Yeah, I remember when I was blessed my first 2 years of high school to play for Doug Peterson, who's obviously a Super Bowl winning coach, tremendous human being. And I remember my freshman year when the playoffs started, he told us that we weren't freshmen anymore. So that was the benchmark for Doug Peterson. Is like, once the playoffs start, you're not a freshman anymore. You've been through 10 games, and now you're basically considered a sophomore. And so, like you said, it was a huge story last year. I remember it got a lot of coverage. St. James hadn't started a freshman at quarterback in a while. Obviously, at a program like that, you kind of always know who your next guy is going to be. And in the smaller classifications, you might have to start a freshman. That we don't see that as much in the Division IIs and Division Is. You don't see a ton of freshmen starting in key roles. Maybe on special teams if a kid's really a stud, something like that. But he's done nothing but just answer the call the last 2 years, and he's been forced to grow up really, really fast. And like we said, gone up in classification against the Terrebonnes, the Ponchachulas, the Archbishop Shaws, huge win over St. Charles Catholic this year. And so seems to be just, leading that train in traditional St. James fashion, and definitely meeting the expectations of his teammates and coaches.
Yeah, both those teams, just like you mentioned with Union Parish, scheduled a bunch of higher classification teams. I thought we would potentially see St. James and Sterlington in the Dome again. The seeds didn't fall that way. That the 2 and the 3, the only losses either of them have are against higher classification teams, 3 5A losses and a 4A loss for St. James against the St. Charles Catholic team that I think is better than an awful lot of 5A teams. And so they're certainly battle tested through the course of this year. All these teams played some higher classification opposition. It's going to make for some good action on Friday night in Division III non-select. In Division III select, we have top seeded Lafayette Christian with a 49-14 win over the reigning champion Catholic New Iberia Panthers. They advance now and will host Dunham, who they battled, had a crazy one last year in the quarterfinals that Dunham was able to come back in a fury late in that game behind Elijah Haven and company, got some stops and just started clicking on their deep passing game. Now Lafayette Christian is the higher seed, gets to host it, gets another shot at them here in the semis with a trip to the Dome on the line after Dunham's 48-22 win down in New Orleans against Isidore Newman. Bottom half of the bracket, I think both of these semifinals are matchups that we anticipated going in, but Calvary Baptist ends the undefeated season for Jules Sumner, goes down to Jules Sumner and gets a 14-7 win. Credit to our guy Mark Miller and company, that defense holding Jules Sumner to just one score on the road. And so now Calvary advances. They'll be back on the road this week to face Notre Dame, who got a 27-19 win in a rematch against Lafayette Renaissance Charter, a new district rivalry. This, for as many deep runs as Calvary Baptist and Notre Dame have both made through the playoffs, this will be the first time that they've faced since the 2015 quarters. Notre Dame's been up some, Calvary's been down some in terms of division, and so they've just missed each other despite the fact that both of them are living in the quarters and semis and beyond each year, and so that'll be interesting. That's a matchup that going into the playoffs, we talked a lot about which team would be healthier at this point. Notre Dame's quarterback had been banged up. Calvary's best lineman had been banged up. I know Drew Lejeune, the Notre Dame quarterback, was back, and, by all accounts, looking good against LRCA. And so the Pios now at home and seem like they're getting back to their full complement of talent here at the right time of year.
I was on that staff in 2015, so thanks for bringing that up. Since we lost that game to Notre Dame. So no, man, but these are the two semifinal matchups that I think we all kind of figured we were going to get, like you mentioned, even though it's not 1, 2, 3, 4, you kind of looked at the teams that have been there a lot and the teams that were ascending, and I've looked at all 4 schedules of these 4 teams. And it speaks to how do you prepare yourself for November and December football. You start with the LCA, like I talked about last week: Rummel, Karen Crow, Westgate, Shaw, Central, and Evangel. That was their non-district schedule. That's a Rummel team, that's consistently deep in the playoffs. A Karen Crow team, same deal. Westgate, one of the most physically talented teams probably every year. Shaw's still in it. Central, defending state champion. Evangel, one of the schools with probably the most, most history of anybody when you put them up there against Curtis and Haynesville and West Monroe, and especially considering that they're a lot younger of a school than some of those other schools. And then the Dunham Tigers, kind of no different, going up in class to play Parkview Live Oak, playing a really good St. Charles Catholic team to a 6-point loss, playing an Ascension Catholic team who technically, yes, that's down in competition, but Ascension Catholic's still playing and has arguably the best runner in the state. And so teams that have prepared themselves for these moments, LCA, there are times, Jared, I know you've seen them play in person. There are times when LCA looks like they might be the best team in the state, and that's not just in their division. They've got an argument, to be mentioned with Edna Cars and schools like that that are up at the top of everybody's list. But LCA just keeps trucking along, man. They just keep handling business. Beat a really, really good Catholic New Iberia team the way they did. Just shows a lot about how good this team is. But Elijah Haven, man, what an incredible season he's having here at Dunham. In Baton Rouge, here where both of us are located. And so goes to Newman, which is, a great place for a playoff game. Aaron Weiss did a really, really good job in his first season with the Greenies. And once the Dunham offense caught fire, Elijah just kind of did his thing and were able to get a big, what ended up being a lopsided win to set up a really, really fun matchup. It's a shame that this isn't like a time machine of an overlap of Elijah Haven versus Juwan Johnson that we could have had. But still, Lafayette Christian talented at the quarterback position because, of course, they are. Because it's just what they do. They have athletes at every position. A wide receiver who was an Oklahoma commit, who you might can touch on more here in a minute. And then at the bottom half of the bracket, two teams that have just kind of been, like we've mentioned, standard bearers in their division. Calvary Baptist has won multiple state titles all since the split era. Started back in 2013 and 14 with some staffs that I was very, very fortunate to be on. Teams, another team that played a lot of really tough competition, Oak Grove, Neville, Franklin Parish, in non-district, played a really talented Huntington team, gets a dogfight win against a really hungry Jewel Sumner team. Calvary was up 14-0 at half. I don't know the last time Calvary got shut out in a half, but I bet you it's been a while. If you look at how many points Calvary scored this year, their lowest scoring output of the season was 30 points against Oak Grove. And Sumner was able to hold them to 14 all in one half. So really impressive job in season by Sumner. But Calvary gets back to a place where they really expect to be every year in the semifinals, going up against a Notre Dame team who has an absolute legendary coach, obviously, in Louis Cook, who's been doing it a really long time at a really high level. A team that played Southside, who is just continuing under Jess Curtis to get better and better every year. They played a Turlings Catholic team who was the 2 seed in their division, beat a Catholic and New Iberia team that we just talked about how talented they were, beaten a Lafayette Renaissance team twice that we know is incredibly talented, both in the regular season and in the playoffs. So that sets up a really fun matchup, two kind of conflicting offensive styles between Calvary and Notre Dame. Like you said, two teams that are always kind of in the mix, but haven't matched up with each other, but just that one time. And so should make for another fun matchup between the Cavaliers and the Pioneers.
That's the one in this bracket that I looked at going in as kind of the swing game of this bracket as much as any, because it's one that is tough for me to call and was tough for me to call particularly 3 weeks ago, waiting to see how some of the health stuff played out in some key spots. Hayden Lassard in here points out that Lejeune, the quarterback that I mentioned from Notre Dame, he's been back for both their playoff games. And so that's been great for those guys, great for him to just have that opportunity. You want everybody to be healthy this time of year, both so the teams can give it their full go and have their full complement, as well as just for, the kids to get the opportunity to play. And it sucks anytime you have to miss time and be sidelined and not be out there with your guys, with these limited opportunities over a few years to play high school football. But Lafayette Christian has been the team on the top half of this bracket that I looked at as pretty clearly the team to beat for a lot of those reasons that you mentioned, both the talent that is always there. Braylon Walker's the quarterback this year, the last couple of years, and he is absolutely electric running that offense. He's got great weapons, seniors on the outside. He's got a fantastic sophomore running back behind him. One of those receivers, the guy that you alluded to, Braden Allen, has been a very interesting late recruiting process for Braden, who was a one-time Tulane commit this summer, and then all of the Power Fours come in at that point, starting with Ole Miss, who offered 2 days after the Tulane commitment. And so Lane Kiffin and company started to make their move. Eventually, Braden decommits and commits to Oklahoma for an SEC opportunity. LSU came into play for him just a couple of weeks ago. Had a chance to talk to Braden right after that, and he said he's locked in with Oklahoma. He dreamed of maybe playing at LSU one day, but just the fit and the dynamics that were there at Oklahoma were where he and his family felt like he needed to be. Well, now some of that Ole Miss staff, particularly on the offensive side of the ball, is headed to Baton Rouge. And so tonight, just a few hours after Lane Kiffin announces he's coming to Baton Rouge, Braden has taken a step back from that Oklahoma commitment. And a lot of tea leaves would suggest keep an eye on a potential home state signing in a couple of days. I haven't had a chance to talk to Braden, but just watching those puzzle pieces fall into play certainly make a lot of sense there. But as explosive as LCA is on offense and what they can do putting up points, I think watching them matchup defensively at times this season against bigger classification teams, including Evangel and Pop Houston, and seeing the way that defensive front group was able to get after Pop and chase him around, and guys in the secondary making plays, flying around. Luke Green involved on a fantastic stop at the goal line to hold an explosive Evangel team to just 22 points. How that side of it fares against an Elijah Haven and an improved Dunham offense this year, I think, as Elijah continues to progress as a quarterback and some of those receivers continue to come into their own, is going to be a really interesting matchup. And Hayden chimes in as well. Caleb Campbell, the big tackle for LCA, is also back in the mix, a guy that has been recruited during the course of his high school career. He was out the bulk of this year, started rotating in a little bit last Friday. And so another nice opportunity for a talented kid to get back into the flow of things and get back on the field with his teammates.
Yeah, and so I think it's a really interesting dynamic, that top half bracket semifinal game, because, in the class of 2027, all you hear about is Pop Houston and Elijah Haven. They're the two hottest names. Obviously, both play quarterbacks. Elijah's yet to really make himself known where he wants to end up. Pop is a commit to LSU. I'm sure Lane and him will be speaking shortly. But Lafayette Christian's going to have the chance to play both of those guys this year, which is really an interesting dynamic of getting to play both. And you and I discussed when it happened, Lafayette Christian, they slowed Pop down. Only scored 22 points, which was their second lowest output offensively of the entire season, other than their loss to Carr this past Friday night, where they scored 20. Elijah and Pop are not like mirror images of each other. They have different skill sets in a lot of ways. It's not exactly the same as playing one versus the other. But it is an interesting thing that LCA, to get to where they want to be, is going to have to go through both Pop in the regular season and Elijah in the semifinals. Interesting that they're going to be the only team to face off against both of those top quarterback prospects. For a chance to go play under the dome lights.
And Hayden pointing out too, obviously, we talked about there was a playoff matchup last year with Dunham and LCA, and in the scheduling dynamic, Evangel and LCA played in last year's regular season as well. And so they played both of them last year. Last year, Evangel and Dunham won. This year, now LCA is 1-0 to start and has an opportunity for some playoff vengeance against Dunham, that I know guys that went through that heartbreaker that were up in that game and then had the crazy comeback for Elijah Haven and that Dunham team. This is an opportunity that means an awful lot to a senior group that's been through a lot at LCA. But it should be, as it was last year when we talked about the quarters, one of the top matchups to watch around the state. It should be another great one to kind of circle for fans that want to go check out a great high school football game. We're getting to the point where there are fewer and fewer teams, obviously, every week. And so maybe a lot of folks' teams have been eliminated. If you're in the Lafayette area or want to take a trip, over to see that one, that's one that I would rank pretty highly there to go check out. Looking at Division II non-select as we keep on rolling along, North DeSoto, our buddy Bayou Booty, Louisiana Treasures, tears in our beers after our heartbreaking kinder. Thankfully, LSU gave us an early Christmas present. Even the teams that suffered some heartbreak on Friday night, if you're an LSU fan, maybe you got some positive news here today to kind of turn some things around. But in Division II non-select, North DeSoto, the top seed, 51-37 win against Franklinton, a game that was, fast and furious right out of the gate with those teams. I think it was they'd put up like 45 plus points in the first quarter, if I'm not mistaken. North DeSoto advances with a 51-37 win. They will now host a home semifinal against Plaquemine, which got its playoff vengeance in a 47-28 win against Cecilia, who had eliminated Plaquemine from the semifinals last year. Plaquemine this year hosting again, gets its get back. They will now take a pretty long road trip up to North DeSoto. Back-to-back semifinals for Plaquemine. I need to look at the history on that. Last year was the first time they'd been there in a decade, and it had been a while before they got there in 2014. And so to go back-to-back years is pretty tremendous for Coach Donald Williams and company. Now they go face off with Dennis Dunn and company up north, a team that in North Dakota that was obviously in the Dome 3 years ago and has been knocking and battling and trying to get back over that hump with Luke Delafield and company. Bottom half of the bracket, Iowa, the 2 seed, 28-21 win against Lutcher in a great quarterfinal game out there in Iowa. Iowa is now in the semis for the third time in 4 years, back-to-back years. Been mentioning Coach Tommy Johns every week and the job that those guys do with the Yellow Jackets. They're doing a great job again, obviously, as a 2 seed and on to the semifinals, where they'll host Belle Chase, who got a 39-16 win over West Feliciana. So the Cardinals keep on rolling. They've had a great defense all year. They've got some guys that can make some plays when given the opportunity on offense, and you saw it with 39 points against a good West Feliciana team. This is the first time Belle Chase has been this far since 2008, a dome trip for those guys. And so been a minute for the Cardinals. They're now back. Can Iowa get over the hump? Can Belle Chase continue its kind of, whether you want to call it Cinderella or resurgence type run, and get back to a place they have not been in quite a while? A lot of great storylines in the always open and interesting Division II non-select.
Yeah, the North Dakota Griffins, led by Dennis Dunn, one of the winningest coaches as far as championships go, in our state, especially active coaches, all-time coaches. You can really match him up against anybody, and he's got the resume to compete. The Griffins, as we talked about, they had that marquee win against West Monroe way back in week 3, where they went to West Monroe, a good Rebels team, and won. And then they honestly, other than that game against Loyola, they haven't really been tested since week 3 against West Monroe. They've been kind of running through folks since then. And so it was really good for them. And I think Coach Dunn would probably agree to be tested by a really, really good Franklinton team in a dogfight in which, they were down 30-29 at halftime. So North Dakota comes out. They have a offensive explosion on both sides in the first quarter, 29-20 at the end of the first quarter. North Dakota, Franklinton outscores them 10-8 in the second quarter to take a halftime lead. North Dakota is able to get on the board twice in the second half. And so they're able to pull out the 51-37, obviously a very high-scoring victory for the Griffins. But, Coach Dunn looking to make another dome trip, obviously has taken multiple schools to multiple state championship games. And so this is a really big deal for the people in Stonewall. Obviously, they're 12-0 right now. One of the last few undefeated teams, even with the teams that have made it this far, one of the last few undefeateds. But going up against a Plaquemine team where, man, I've been talking about Donald Williams. It seems like every week that we've been doing this, man, the job he's done. Started off the season with obviously a super tough game going to Zachary and falling short of a team that's still playing. They get into a very large Baton Rouge district, so not a lot of non-district games for the Green Devils. Beating a really, really good Bruley and West Feliciana team on their way to a district championship. A team in Cecilia that you and I both have a lot of love for, that we sing their praises a lot, and they go handle business. A game that I thought was going to come down to the wire, and it just wasn't the case. It was 26 to 0 at halftime. Plaquemine, and they kind of just cruised in this one. Cecilia was able to put together some good drives in the second half, but it was just too little too late. The Green Devils kind of dictated this one. And so now they're in a position, that they, like you said, haven't been in a ton, and now have an opportunity, obviously in a very long trip, to be able to maybe punch their ticket to somewhere that Plaquemine High has. I don't think they've never been. I think they've been. I think it was a long time ago that they played for a state championship. I think they do have a runner-up maybe to their name. But on the bottom half of the bracket, Coach Tommy Johns and the job he does at Iowa every single year. Man, what a just like a defining win over a Lutcher team that's just really, really good, man. Like a pesky team every single year. A team that you and I had talked a ton about. A team that I think maybe both of us maybe expected to be in the semis right now and getting ready for that. But, the Iowa Yellow Jackets had something to say about that. And so they were able to put down a really, really good Lutcher team. kind of a marquee win for them on the year, to be able to punch this ticket to go up against a Bell Chase team, like you mentioned, that it's been a while since the Cardinals have been in this situation. They played St. Charles Catholic this year as tough as really anybody did. They got their kind of marquee win over Shaw 14-0, who's still playing back in the regular season the night before Halloween. Beat a really scrappy Westville team last week. So that sets up a really fun matchup, honestly, for me, because, you and I are both kind of nerds of all this stuff and the brackets. And Iowa Bell Chase in a semi is just good for football, man. It's two teams that we haven't seen in this position in a really long time. And so, Division II non-select, as you and I both said 3 weeks ago, it's always so wide open in Division II non-select who can go win this thing. And I think the teams that are standing right now in the semis kind of prove that.
And this kind of feeds into a question that Lucas Hill had in the chat of where I was going to be this week. I'm pretty sure I'm at a point, and we'll get to this game more later, where if Carr and Catholic play, I'm probably going to be at Carr and Catholic. But when they meet in the playoffs, there's usually another game or another few games that really intrigue me that I'm torn and want to get to. I was at that LCA and Dunham quarterfinal last year. I would love to be at that semifinal this year. I think that's a super intriguing matchup, as I mentioned. And this Bell Chase Iowa game is one that I feel like two teams trying to get to the Dome, whether for the first time or the first time in almost 2 decades, would be an incredible game and atmosphere and story to be at. And so it's probably not the one that's going to catch everyone's eye around the state quite so much, but it's one that I think is super intriguing. Those teams are going to get out there and play. I expect high level defense on both sides of that equation, but both have playmakers, as I mentioned, that can break some things when given the opportunity. And so that's going to be an interesting matchup and kind of a clash of styles from what I expect the top half of that bracket to look like, where going into this season, we kind of knew North DeSoto, the Northwestern State committed quarterback Luke Delafield, the Louisiana Tech committed running back Kenny Thomas and company. They were going to put up points and give people fits, and that's kind of part of what Coach Dunn and company want to do, is just keep applying that pressure and keep folks on their heels. Plaquemine came into this year with a lot of that defense back, but a new quarterback, a new running back, some new guys on that offensive line, and so was interested to see how that piece of it came together for the Green Devils. And since that Zachary game, I think they're averaging like 46 or 47 points. And so tremendous job for the junior quarterback, Brennan Miles, that running back, Spencer Collins, and they've got some experienced receivers on the outside. But Plaquemine has, I'm not going to say not missed a beat from the great seniors they had in the backfield last year, but they're putting up an awful lot of points to go with that great defense as well.
So Plaquemine played in the Class A 1961 state championship, where they lost to Tallulah. And that's their only trip. Yeah, that's their only trip to the state championship. Obviously, we know at the time, you mentioned Bell Chase made a trip in 2008. North DeSoto made a trip just in 2022 where they fell short to that really, really good lunch-led Lutcher team, which every time I say lunch-led Lutcher, I feel like I'm about to, it's hard to say. And so some new faces here and some teams kind of returning to some former glory. Makes for some really fun matchups. Like I said, man, Division II non-select is, to me, the most wide-open bracket every year.
Always a lot of fun. Division II select is one I think we've been looking forward to getting to this point as well, particularly the top half of that bracket. We knew we were going to get a great semifinal matchup, whether it be a St. Charles or an E.D. White or Madison Prep or U-High, and we get St. Charles versus U-High, the 1 versus the 4, the home quarterfinal teams, the highest seeds on that half of the bracket. St. Charles with a 31-0 shutout of E.D. White. Just Wayne Stein and company continue to flex when you talk about great defenses that have had a lot of success in some big games this year, including against some teams that are still playing deep into this playoff bracket. So the Comets move on with that win. U-High holds off Madison Prep 32-30. That was the game that I was at. It was a rematch of a tight thriller from Halloween night and was that much closer maybe than than this time around. Madison Prep with the ball late, down 2, driving, and Lamar Brown just decides, I'm the best player in the state of Louisiana, and I'm going to go ahead and chase down the quarterback and swipe this thing loose for another takeaway. U-High had really key takeaways in moments throughout that night. I thought Madison Prep was great, and particularly in the second half, there were stretches where it looked like they were about to be headed to the semis, but U-High comes back, retakes the lead, and then holds off Madison Prep's rally attempt 32-30. And so we get a very familiar U-High St. Charles matchup at the top half of the bracket. The two teams that scrimmage each other every single year. They met in a 2023 semifinal down in Laplace that was decided in overtime, a 10-7 win for St. Charles on a field goal by a young kicker who I believe is now a senior for those guys. And a lot of players that are now seniors on this team had roles on that team 2 years ago. Bottom half of the bracket, 2 upsets. Vanderbilt Catholic 31-28 win out there against Lake Charles College Prep. Just the third time that anyone this season held LCCP and all of the weapons that they have under 30 points. And so Brian Wallace and company, the Terriers, keep on moving back to the semifinals for the first time since 2021. Archbishop Shaw took as long a trip as just about anybody, if not anyone, last week or a couple days ago now. And Hank Tierney and company, I believe, scored on every possession. At least that's what Hank was telling my guy Jacob up there after the game on our interviews on Louisiana versus all y'all. 38-7 win for Archbishop Shaw, ending that Loyola Prep run. This was an example of a team that didn't have a key guy. Bryce Restovich, the fantastic junior quarterback for Loyola Prep, was out with an illness, and Coach Tierney mentioned immediately after the game, before even talking about the game, that he was just sad for that young man, and had wanted to play the best Loyola Prep team and with a full complement of players. The Flyers, unfortunately, were without Bryce. Battled, certainly, got their lone score late. We're still fighting there late, but Archbishop Shaw, that reigning champion, was just too much, and so they move right back on to the semis as a 7 seed, a much different looking roster, graduated 17 of its starters from last year's Dome team, and yet Hank Tierney and company are right there back in the semifinals and just 4 quarters potentially, whether them or Vanderbilt Catholic, from making the Dome.
Yeah, like you said, man, this one's a lot of fun because we didn't get 1, 2, 3, 4, but like it feels like we got the 4 best teams, regardless of their seeds here. Just a hats off. Looking at the bottom half of the bracket, an overtime win by Vanderbilt Catholic, and the job Brian Wallace has done there. In just a short time. I actually was able to watch the end of that one because after our game Friday night, that game was still going on. And so I flipped it on and I watched the overtime. Lake Charles Prep fell about, I think it was 2 yards short of a touchdown that would have won them the game. Hats off to the Vanderbilt Catholic Terriers, who will now host a semifinal. I saw a graphic that they posted, like the road to the Dome runs through Homa, and I was like, man, that's freaking awesome. It was Big Terrier standing in front of the Dome. Vanderbilt Catholic, well, we've talked a lot about them. They got that big win over Lutcher in district earlier in the year. Keep playing really good ball, finding ways to advance. I knew it was going to be tough on Loyola facing Shaw anyway, but with their starting quarterback out, who was on pace to potentially set some records this year in the state of Louisiana, he goes down ill, which is, a bummer for the Flyers, but they'll be back, man. He's got another year. They're doing some really good things over there at Loyola Prep. And so, but it sets up a really fun matchup. The defending champion and Shaw going on the road to Homa to face a really tough Vanderbilt team. And then at the top of the bracket, St. Charles Catholic is exactly where we expected them to be, which is hosting a semi. And Jarrett, don't quote me on this one because I'm usually wrong about this stuff, but I don't think anybody else has as many opponents still playing as St. Charles Catholic. St. Charles has 4 opponents that are still in the playoffs. They play Dunham, St. James, Belle Chase, and Shaw, who are all still in the playoffs. And so I guess a case could have been made for that District 2 5A, but all but 2 of those teams have been eliminated. And so Man, so actually no, there's 3 of those left. So there might be that might be the closest one, but that's still just 2 matchups each. So St. Charles has played some really good competition. A really good Newman team, good Lutcher team. We've talked a lot about Dunham. They have their one blemish on their record, that 6-point loss to St. James in the middle of the season. They top Bell Chase and Shaw in district, who they outscored 43-7 in those 2 games against 2 teams that are still playing. Just shows how impressive the Comets are this year. But those U-High Cubs, man, like what a gutsy, impressive win that they had, that you were able to check out against, the Madison Prep Chargers, who once again had an incredible season. 2 teams that I'm familiar with. Obviously at Catholic High, we played Madison Prep in our jamboree. Then we played U-High in week 3. So I can attest to how talented both those teams are. U-High, another team who prepared themselves for deep runs in the playoffs with games against Rummel, Catholic High, and St. Paul in non-district. Pull off the 32-30 win. And like you mentioned, Lamar Brown did what you expect him to do with the game on the line, man. He just kind of took over, came up really, really big with a strip sack that kind of iced things for the Cubs. And so that sets up, honestly, one of the most fun matchups in the state with the St. Charles Comets against the U-High Cubs.
Shout out to Charles Lowry, who just, if this was a trivia question, he just nailed it, because as I was still struggling to try and think of who else, because, a lot of these teams maybe had 3, or a few of these teams had 3, but Neville played Calvary, Sterlington, and then the two district opponents. So Calvary matches St. Charles for both of them having played 4 teams that are still standing along with them here late in the season. Shout out Charles on that one. Yeah, I don't have much more to add to Division II Select. I know Sam Spiegelman asked me whether it was later Friday night or sometime Saturday, as he was kind of going back through some of my tweets from the U-High game, just my expectations for that semifinal. And I think it's probably going to look not unlike the semifinal 2 years ago, where it is super defensive dominated, and it's, the winning team may only have 10 points or 17 points or whatever it may be. I wouldn't be surprised if it's like a 17-13 final in that one, and was super impressed in somewhat that type of a game in terms of closeness of it by Lamar Brown, a guy that is a trench athlete that we're used to this time of year. The highlights on Friday night that get cycled around, the viral clips, the stuff that's making the TV broadcast or whatever, it may be a highly touted quarterback or skill guy or whatever, but Lamar Brown as a guy in the trenches impacted that game so aggressively. And I kind of likened it some to like a basketball team when your best player is the first guy onto the court chasing loose balls. That was Lamar Brown all night. He ends up with a touchdown on a fumble recovery where he was like the 6th closest guy to the ball when it came loose, but just saw it and darted through and got it. And so shout out to him. Another one of those guys that we talked about at the beginning, Lane Kiffin recruiting Louisiana already. Lamar was already in the coach's office with Lane Kiffin tonight within an hour after arriving to Baton Rouge. And so not shocking when you think about the type of player that Lamar is, but also just kind of the nature of the beast at this point, where Lane's been through that whirlwind of a weekend and trying to figure out where his life is taking him, and he's got to immediately touch down and start recruiting.
Sign up for it.
Yeah, that's true. Looking forward to signing day for Lamar and a lot of these guys around the state. Let's move up now to Division I non-select, and this is, another fitting one transition-wise. We just talked about that St. Charles team that played so many teams that are still alive in the playoffs. The bottom half of this, that Neville team that still is, and 3 of those District 2-5A teams are still alive and well in Division I non-select. Top-seeded Ruston with a 38-28 win against Southside. That was a game that I think we looked at last week and thought Southside could maybe challenge Ruston more than some folks around the state we're going to necessarily credit Jess Curtis and those guys have done a nice job building that program now. Year 2, back in the quarterfinals for back-to-back years for a young program and battling top-seeded Ruston, who has been as much the standard bearer of this division in recent years as anyone. And so Ruston is back into the semis, and they will be facing 13th-seeded Zachary, which got a 31-27 win at Central, a rematch of that October 30th game where Central got the late 2-point conversion stop to hold off the Broncos. This time, down late, the Broncos able to get a 4-yard touchdown there. Michael Kirby, the quarterback, on an inside zone read that he pulls and takes up the middle and threw a defender to a game-winning touchdown in the final minute. And so Zachary High is back to the semis, and Zachary High and Ruston will play now for the 4th straight playoff year. Ruston has eliminated Zachary somewhere along the way the past 3 years. Zachary was kind of the team that you looked at for years, had become kind of the standard of this bracket and was knocking off teams left and right. And now they've run into Ruston these last few years and trying to get back over that hump. This year is the 13 seed. Bottom half of the bracket, Neville, Washita, rematch. Charles Lowry said earlier, if fans up there want to play this thing over at ULM, put it in Malone Stadium and let everybody come out. This is a game that was tight last time around. Washita gave up a bunch on special teams and came up just short in a 1-point game, I believe it was, to Neville. And I think this is a Washita team that has improved a ton from some of those lessons through district and losing those 4 straight games. Saw them in the second round, and they talked about it. I mean, going through that Neville game, that they realized they needed to clean up a lot of the small things, including special teams, and special teams were a huge part of Washita winning that game against Destrehan from, playing from ahead early and never trailing at Destrehan. And Washita gets a 28-22 win against Parkway in the quarters to get back to this point. Neville gets a 42-0 win against a Barb team that we talked about the last couple of weeks that had been rolling along. And so as much as I say this is a much improved Washita team, Neville seems like it is playing some of its best football at the right time of year too. When you look at what they did to a Barb team that had just upset Northwood, Shreveport, and West Monroe, a great 2-5A rematch here in the semis.
Yeah, man, and this Ruston team, like you mentioned, we talk a lot about these battle-tested teams. We've talked about the schedule that Ruston played, non-district and in district. They were one of the teams that, even with a tough district, decided to go out and schedule some of the very best of Texas and some tough Arkansas competition. They opened with Acadiana. They got those wins over Washita and Neville in back-to-back weeks in district, 21-14 over Washita, 41-37 over Neville before they dropped that lone district loss that they had to Ash there in the later part of the season. But man, Ruston has kind of like just cemented themselves the last 4 years, 5 years as just like a standard in Division I non-select, returning to some former glory of theirs that they would have had in the early 90s and some other different periods, but just continuing to push out just elite talent, guys going to LSU and all over the place. And now they're going to face a Zachary team who has, like you mentioned, kind of been a standard bearer, multiple state championships, starting off in 2015 and then making a run several other times with guys like Lindsey Scott and some Chris Hilton. You could just name the names that everybody knows. I said last week it was going to be really hard on Central to beat Zachary twice. We've described Zachary, I have, as a pissed off football team. It's a team that their regular season did not go the way they wanted it to. It started off really well. They run into a couple of really tough district matchups. End up losing 3 district games. And they go into the playoffs hungry to kind of reassert themselves and remind everybody who they are. And so that they've been able to do that. Beating 2 teams from the Baton Rouge area on the road, Denham Springs and Central, in back-to-back weeks, 2 incredibly talented ball clubs. And now they set up a 3rd straight road trip for themselves, going up to face the Ruston Bearcats in a game that should be as advertised. Teams that are still loaded with talent. Teams that are very well coached. Jared Ball on one side, David Brewerton on the other. Guys that just do a really great job year in, year out. On the bottom half of the bracket, you get the very rare district rematch in the semifinals. A game like you mentioned, 38-37 win for Neville in the regular season. I said it to you when the brackets came out. I said it to a buddy of mine at work the other day. Washita Parish is the best 6-4 team in the history of football because they lost those 4 games to 4 really good teams, 3 of which were all one-score games. And so now they've run through the playoffs. They keep finding ways to survive and advance against really good competition. A very tough Santa Maula team. They win by 3. They go on the road to 3-seeded Destrehan and win by 2. They go on the road again to 6-seeded Parkway and get a 6-point win. A team that they had played way back in the scrimmage that they had seen a little bit before. And now it sets up a really fun rematch where they take we've talked about the longest bus trips. Washita might have the shortest bus trip of anybody in the state when they head over to face the Neville Tigers at Bill Ruppel Stadium. Great place to watch a high school football game, especially this time of year. And so that's a matchup that it's hard to not. I'll spoil it. That game is going to be on my 5 to watch. Like there's really no doubt. The Neville Tigers and Washita. Washita is so battle tested. They are ready for, a dogfight when they face the Neville Tigers again. And some of those rematch dynamics that we've talked so much about are going to come up. And it's going to be interesting to see how this version of Lions versus Tigers goes.
Waterboy Tiger said, Neville fan here, great win against Barb last week, but this week we play a Washita team not even 15 minutes from us, the 2 big schools of Monroe. What a story. It'll be standing room only, which I think is, as Charles Lowry mentioned earlier on, how much it would be great to maybe play it over at Malone Stadium at ULM. And I don't know that Coach Collins and company want to give up that home field, though. I know that that's a place that they have felt the benefits of going up there for that Alexandria game late in the season. Coach Bachman mentioned, he thought the atmosphere kind of affected them a bit, that it was a rowdy place to go into. And so while it'll be a short trip for Washita, it'll be one that I know Neville is happy is at their place rather than, out off Millhaven at Washita Parish, where actually when we talk about how close they are, I stayed out toward Washita when I was up there for the Neville game because it was just a pretty easy, quick little drive over there. These are 2 fantastic ones. You talk about the 2-5A matchup in the semis, and it's rare to get that district rematch this late in the playoffs. If Ruston can take care of Zachary, one way or another, you're getting a 2-5A game in the Dome. If the Bearcats can take care of their business against Zachary, which again they have the last 3 years. But I think Coach Brew and those Broncos have had a lot of fun with this year, and to feel doubted and to feel like they can have a little chip on their shoulder. Brew and all of his media stuff in recent weeks seems like he's kind of enjoying it. As much pressure as there is every year there, and folks taking for granted a lot of times that they need to be in the Dome every year. No questions asked. The fact that they struggled through a couple of those and get to be a little bit more of an underdog than has been their case historically, I think is a hat that they're really enjoying wearing right now.
Yeah, there's no doubt. And so, programs like Zachary, programs like Union Parish, like some of these teams we've talked about, like you can throw the seeds out the window when it comes to this time of year. Nobody cares. I guarantee you Ruston doesn't care that Zachary's the 13th seed. They know that they're facing off against, one of the absolute best programs in the state of Louisiana year in, year out. I'm sure Coach Brew, if I know him as well as I think I do, is relishing that underdog status. They're going to throw everything they got at the Bearcats, and it's going to be a great game. And if things go the way of the Bearcats, we're going to have to do our research to see when's the last time there was a district championship, state championship game, because that's a rarity. And so we're going to have to definitely find out when the last one that was.
We've had a couple in recent years. So Opelousas and Cecilia was a district rematch a couple of years ago. And then obviously there are times in the Division I select in particular where you end up with a couple of Catholic League teams like a Jesuit and Curtis one year. Basically, any time that the New Orleans schools are able to keep you guys at Catholic High out of the picture, there's a chance that they're going to get a Catholic League. And so this is, we look at the 3 2-5A teams in Division I non-select. There are 3 Catholic League teams in Division I select, along with the Catholic High Bears. Edna Carr, the top seed, with a 49-20 win against Evangel Christian down there in Algiers. And so now they'll have the opportunity to host a home semifinal again against Catholic High of Baton Rouge, which got a 44-6 win against Alexandria in the 4-5 matchup. I didn't write down the exact numbers of how consistently Carr and Catholic keep running into each other in quarterfinals and semifinals, but there is certainly a nice history there, including last year in a really tight semifinal game where you guys gave Carr as tight a battle as anyone did over the course of that undefeated run they had last year. Bottom half of the bracket, a couple of Catholic League teams advancing. St. Aug gets a 35-10 win against Rummel in what was a Catholic League rematch from district. And John Curtis, the 7 seed, goes out to Turlings Catholic for the second straight year's quarterfinals and gets an upset win. And so 21-7 for the Patriots. They advance. Will now face St. Aug in the semis at Tad Gormley Stadium. That was a game. That was a Week 10 game that St. Aug won big. St. Aug had not had much success against John Curtis until they got a close one last year and a more emphatic one this year. And so the opportunity now to either make it 3 straight against the Patriots or for JT and company to get back on the right side of that matchup at a time when it matters most, where these two teams are playing for an opportunity to go play in the Dome. 2 fantastic semifinal matchups, again, to answer some of the questions that we get every week of where I'm going to be on Friday night. Pretty sure I'm going to Edna Carr Catholic. That's just become kind of where I'm going to be if those two teams play. Catholic battles Carr as well as anyone every year they play. And so I expect it to be another interesting one on Friday night for a Carr team that is viewed as kind of the team to beat in the state. And Catholic has been as much of a challenge to them when they cross paths as anyone.
Yeah. So, we keep saying should be a really good game. It's because it's the semifinals. They're all going to be good. Edna Carr, just incredible program. Opens the season with 2 really big wins over Shaw and American Heritage Florida. Both still playing. I looked it up, by the way. American Heritage is playing in the semifinals this week in Florida. Shaw obviously still playing. Win over St. Aug, who we talked about, and John Curtis, who are at the bottom half of this bracket, still playing. And so obviously the Carr Cougars are as advertised. Coach Bryce Brown is one of the best high school football coaches in the country. And I think it's pretty safe to say that with the job that he does every single year. Going up against a matchup against the Catholic High Bears, who, honestly, weird game Friday night against the Ash Trojans. A coach in Thomas Bachman that I have all the respect in the world for, a guy that I've known my whole life. Down 6-3 at halftime. End up winning 44-6. Just turned it on in the second half. Incredible job by our kids at Catholic. I could highlight names all day. Some of them some of them only we know, which is just some Catholic High guys. Some a guy like Max Maurer at linebacker number 43, who I know you've seen play several times, a 3-year starter on that defense, which is really impressive considering some of the names that have come out of that defense and some names that we still have. Just does an incredible job. Obviously, the Blaine Bradfords, Ohio State commit, Harrison Kader, Louisiana Lafayette commit. They just do an incredible job. Our guys up front did a really great job in the second half. Our coaches, our varsity staff is incredible. They do a great job of adjusting, and they had a great plan to come out and attack a really, really tough Trojans defense. And our defense just kept giving us opportunities. And I think that's just a testament to the job that Deuce Harrison and his staff do on the defensive side. We're really, really fortunate to have guys like Dustin Nothnagel, who's a former head coach on our defensive staff. A guy like Benny Logan, who's a legend at LSU, played the NFL for the Eagles, Chiefs, Titans. Shout out to also Wes White, Kenny Riche, who also coach on our defensive staff. Just having a great plan against a high-powered offense. I think I think we held Ash to 30 carries for 75 yards or something like that on running the football, which you and I both sang the praises last week of their running backs and the job that they did all year. And so sets up a really fun matchup, man. Like, going down to Algiers last year for me was a first. I'd never been. I'd never seen Carr actually play in person until I did it as a coach last year. And they're as advertised. Like I said, one of the best coaches in the country. It's going to be a really, really fun game between two great programs that are both led by great men at the top and have a bunch of really talented kids. In the bottom half of the bracket, you have John Curtis, who kind of like when you talk about Union Parish and teams like that, it doesn't matter that Union Parish was that John Curtis was the 7th seed. When the grass turns brown, nobody wants to see the Patriots and JT Curtis and the job that he's done for almost 60 years at this point. I think it's like year 55, 56, something like that. I know the 50th anniversary was just a few years ago because they had a patch on their jerseys, I remember. Incredible human being. Obviously, they start off the season super hot. Start off the season 7-0 before that loss to Carr. 8-0 before that loss to Carr. And then they lose to St. Aug. Obviously, like you said, St. Aug's gotten them now twice in the regular season, 2 years in a row. And a really tough district managed coach Robert Valdez, who he wins everywhere he goes. So it's really, when he took the St. Aug job, I remember, I think you and I talked about it. I was like, it's only a matter of time before this is a semifinal team that's going to be knocking on the door. They run through the playoffs through two of arguably the two best teams in Lafayette this year, other than LCA in St. Thomas More and Turlings. Their defense holds both teams to 7 points. Incredibly impressive effort by the John Curtis defense. And now they get a rematch with St. Aug, and St. Aug's got that one blemish on their record. And you best believe that those kids at St. Aug, their thoughts, it's definitely crossed their mind of an opportunity maybe next week to avenge that one loss. But I promise you, Coach Valdez has those guys focused on what's important. They know that they have a really tough game on their hands against a team who has more playoff wins than anybody ever in our state, more state championships than anybody ever in our state. I think they have the most state championships in the country of any high school, if I'm not mistaken. And so really, really tall task for the Purple Knights, but they're up for it. They've already gotten the win over John Curtis once this year. But beating John Curtis twice, that's a tall task. And so it's going to be a really, really two really fun matchups here in this Division I select bracket, which honestly is what we've expected from the beginning. No matter what 4 teams were there, we knew it was going to be a good one.
I think for St. Aug, they look, whether it be players of that team or certainly fans of that team, look at that Carr game that you mentioned, the one blemish, and they see a couple of missed opportunities that that game, despite becoming a 21-point margin by the end of it, that it could have been a much different looking game if a couple of pivotal plays had gone a little differently. And so it's going to be interesting to watch Coach Valdez and company keeping this group focused and on the semifinals and not thinking ahead to what could be in the Dome and a historic opportunity to get back to that point for the first time in decades and whatnot. Because on the other side, that Curtis team that you mentioned that can, particularly this time of year, beat anyone on a given Friday night, that Curtis team probably feels pretty similarly about both that Carr game and the Curtis and the St. Aug game that in week 9 and week 10 they dropped, where if Curtis just takes better care of the football in some spots in those games, that those could have been much, much different matchups. Carr was obviously particularly a handful up front for them to just try and give themselves an opportunity in terms of holding off Big Rich and company, but turnovers really got that thing spiraled away from the Patriots. And then after that initial flurry, they were kind of back and forth, kind of what and what score wise for a lot of that game until a big Rich Anderson fumble return for kind of the big man touchdown exclamation point, and kind of a fitting way to tie up that one because of the takeaways throughout the night. But y'all's matchup, that Carr Catholic game, I mentioned Catholic has given Carr as consistent of problems as anyone, whether that be years like last year where everyone expects Carr to win and you guys make it close. And honestly, I don't think I'm sharing anything crazy. And I know a lot, it's not you, but like hearing from a lot of members of that team, y'all feel like it was one that was there for you to win if a couple of things go a little bit differently. So whether it be games like that where you're tight and don't come out on top, but battle Carr as well as anyone in a year where Carr is rolling, or years where Catholic has gotten the best of it and ended Carr seasons in the midst of a playoff run. What do you feel like about, and I might have even asked you this last year, what do you feel like it is about you guys, the matchup problems that you pose, the way that y'all prepare, anything like that, that kind of sets y'all up for success in places where few, if any, other teams around the state can find it?
Honestly, I think it just comes down to the level of belief that our kids have in themselves and in each other. And I know that's a very, very cheesy answer. I know it sounds like coach talk, but I think that's just the reality, man. I think it's obviously the way we prepare. I think is at a very elite level. Our varsity coaches do an incredible job. Every one of them, whatever their role is as far as game planning and preparation, countless hours are spent for every single game, no matter who we're playing. And when it comes, I think basically we don't do anything differently preparation wise for a game like this. And I think that's what makes us good at the preparation, is because we treat every opponent, every opportunity the exact same way. And our kids' just level of belief, I think, just takes care of a lot of problems. I think, if you play hard enough for long enough, things go your way. And you'll get bounces to go your way that may not go as well for an opponent against that same team you're playing. And so I think that has a lot to do with it, man. I think it's just the conviction our kids have to play for Catholic High, represent their school. The work that our varsity coaches do in preparation to really just leave no stone unturned when it comes to any opponent. And then we've got a great group of kids, and I think that's the case. As you've covered Catholic High longer than I've worked at Catholic High, and so I think you can attest that it's just we always have a really good group of kids, man. And people talk about the talent that comes through Catholic, but in reality, there's like 5 guys on the team that play college football, and there's 100 others that are just really tough, gritty, hardworking kids that'll never play football again after they're done, which is the case for most schools that even have D1 talent. And I think it's just the belief that they have in each other and in themselves, and just the way that they choose to represent Catholic every year is just super impressive. And I know Carr probably would say a lot of the same things about their own kids and the job that their staff does in preparation and in the just the effort and belief that their kids have. And I think it's a lot of the testaments of what good programs are able to consistently get out of their kids and out of their coaches.
Yeah, I don't think, being around both those programs a lot, that there's ever a week where either doesn't expect to win. And in the course of a game on a Friday night, I've seen both teams be down and battle back and never show any signs. And not just one season, but over the course of now, however the hell long I've been doing this, see it pop up at different points every few years where it seems like things are going really sideways for Catholic or Carr at a point, and suddenly they're in a hole, and there is no sense of we're not going to win this game on the sideline, just kind of staying the course. And in terms of treating every game like it's just the next game, that was exactly the energy of particularly Blaine Bradford, but Jaden Miles, the running back who scored 4 times in that second half, when they were talking to Brett McCormick and getting some Louisiana Versailles interviews after the game, is he asked about, okay, now you get this opportunity for the game that's going to be circled for a lot of folks around the state that have nothing to do with either team, just want to see Carr and Catholic every year. What does it mean to get this opportunity again? And they both brushed it off pretty soundly that this was just kind of the next game, and the opponent is nameless and faceless, and you just have to play to the Catholic High standard. And I know that is ultimately how Carr feels too, is second to none. Just go be Carr and you can win any game.
Yeah, and I think it's like I said, I think it's a testament to just the really good programs in our state and the way they approach everything. Never too high, never too low, no matter what's going on in the game. Like, we're down 3 at half. to a really, really good team, and there wasn't an ounce of doubt on our sideline that if we just played our game, then things would go our way. And I think teams like Carr and John Curtis, and you can go down the line, the Union Parishes and Sterlington, small schools, big schools, doesn't matter. It's just a level of belief that just gets drilled into your kids from the moment they step on campus until the moment their playing time is done, that they're just never out of the fight. And I think you see that on full display at this time of year.
Do you have, looking at all 8 brackets, a team or two that is the biggest surprise to you? Just, a great story that has kind of put together a playoff run that, proved a lot of folks wrong, including our expectations going in. I think on it, both of us have, not to toot our own horn, but done a fairly good job of picking a lot of these games, even kind of when you pick brackets to start the playoffs, any one bounce or drive or whatever here or there can suddenly make your semifinal picks look goofy as all hell because just one game got away and you're picking for 4 or 5 games at a time for high school teams. But most of our semifinalists are still intact here.
Yeah, and to be honest, the 3 highest seeds, or I guess I should say lowest seeds, still remaining. None of them are on my list because they're Union Parish, Zachary, and a really, really good Ouachita Parish team that we've talked a lot about. But a couple of teams that I don't want to say surprised, but just that I'm really impressed with the job that they've done so far. Division 4 non-select, that Jeanerette team, the 4 seed. Like I said, bounce back from that really tough overtime district loss to Covenant Christian to get to a point that they haven't been here at this point, playing in the semifinals against Haynesville. If you look at that 1 seed in Division 4 Select, Westminster, I highlighted them as kind of a team that I'm just really impressed with. None of their kids have ever been in this situation to be a 1 seed. They've gone and gotten 2 really big playoff wins to set up a really great matchup with Ascension Catholic. And then, the job of Iowa, Coach Tommy Johns, like we talked about, getting over the hump a lot. For the last couple of years that you and I have done this, we have talked a lot about, just the teams looking to get over the hump, the teams looking to get to a place they haven't really been much. And so Iowa looking to do that, trying to get to the state championship. Coach Johns, obviously, like you said, his name trips me out every time I say it. Like I'm glad he's not a baseball coach, because that would be like really hilarious. But the job he does, man, like I've coached against Coach Johns, like incredible job. Has built a super competitive program, and now the Yellow Jackets are looking to make some history. That they've never won a state championship, and so now they are looking to kind of cement themselves as a team that, hey, we're not going to be a bridesmaid, so to speak, anymore. We are ready to get over that hump and represent our school and our community in the state championship. I'm scrolling through the runner-up page of 14-0 Productions, and I don't think Iowa's ever even played for a state championship. And so obviously they probably feel like they have a lot to prove. They're going to have a really, really tough game on their hands against a really good Belle Chase team that we've talked about, looking to get back to the Superdome for the first time in a really long time. And so, the Iowa Yellow Jackets, Westminster and Jeanerette. Those are 3 teams that I'd like to highlight, even though they're all high seeds. What's funny in this playoff year is the seeds and the teens aren't really surprising that they made it this far, because we know how good of teams that they are. But those 3 teams I want to highlight just for the job that they've done to try to change the narrative around their program this year by the runs that they're on.
Yes, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, that semifinal, the first of these 3 recent semifinal runs for Iowa, was their first semifinal, and so they've gotten to a place where they had never been already the last few years, and now they're trying to kind of take that next step. And sometimes to really kind of establish your program and hit another gear and just kind of change the narrative, all you need is kind of that one key win at some point, and then everything can kind of snowball. And I think they had that a couple of years ago to a point, and now they're trying to get to that next level, that next gear. But looking at like surprises or whatever around the brackets, I'm kind of with you that I don't know that there are any huge surprises to me. There are teams like Ouachita Parish that I don't know that going to the playoffs, I thought they would be at this point, but I thought they could be at this point. I thought that second round game against Destrehan would be really interesting. I picked Zachary to get to this point and be in the semis. Vanderbilt Catholic, I'm impressed for them to get back to this point, and so credit to those guys. Union Parish, kind of similar to Ouachita. They're a lower seed, or similar to Zachary in a lot of ways, lower seed, but you expect them to be in the playoffs and deep runs. And so I don't think I took them here, but the path lined up in such a way where they were going to have opportunities, and they've certainly capitalized on them the last couple of weeks to push it to this point and now face a Gina team on the road where they won just a couple of years ago in the semifinals. And I don't think I mentioned Ascension Episcopal yet, but credit to those guys for putting together a run and now being a 6 seed in the semis for the first time in a while. But all teams that you could see it happening, even if didn't necessarily pick it, and credit to them for getting it done.
Yeah, without a doubt. I think to some people you might see some surprises with people that don't keep up with it the way you and I do. But we know how good all these teams are, and I think they're showing it. Like a great call for you to mention Vanderbilt Catholic right there, a team that showed all year how good they are, but a team that hasn't had a lot of super deep playoff runs to talk about. They have that one slip up on their schedule. It's in week 10 to a really good Edie White team in a huge rivalry game, obviously a super emotional game every single year, and they dropped that one 28-21. Super hard fought game where the Terriers kind of clawed back in it late and fell short. And they've been able to go. They get an exciting overtime win over Lake Charles Prep. And so that's a good team to highlight as well. Obviously super well coached with Brian Wallace and the job he did not only at Nichols, but now as a head coach at the high school ranks, similar to like Ali Roussel at Riverside. And so, like I said, not a lot of surprises, but some teams you definitely want to highlight for kind of making some history along the way.
So now we're to the semifinals. 2 weeks left of high school football. Make sure you get out there Friday night to some of these games, the last games on the actual high school campuses before we head everything into the Superdome next Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Semifinals are always such a fun week for exactly those reasons, and I'm looking forward to getting out of there. I hate wrapping up when I watch our number of viewers still climbing. I feel like, we should just stick around forever and let that number keep climbing and rising. But we've gone through the brackets, got plenty to do certainly this weekend thanks to the colleges, so I got to go catch back up on some of that stuff. But appreciate you, man, taking some time to talk about all of it, and good luck to you guys this week.
Appreciate it, man.
He's Chance Hester from Louisiana Football Report. I'm Jarrett Roser from Louisiana Versus All y'all. Thank all of you who chimed in, folks that viewed on the different platforms, and certainly folks that chimed in with some comments along the way, like Hayden Lassard, Charles Lowry, Lucas Hill, Bayou Booty, Louisiana Treasures, Waterboy, Tiger. Appreciate y'all. Most of y'all have been with us all postseason this year, and so that is much appreciated. It's great to hear from y'all, and good luck to y'all's teams. I know a couple of y'all are Neville fans up there, in particular Hayden with LCA, and good luck to you guys on Friday night. See some of y'all soon. Until then, y'all be well.